Welcome to Steen Family Outdoors. Today, we're going to talk about cartridge comparisons. And I'm going to use some recent examples from one of my favorite YouTubers and gun writers, Ron Spomer, and pick apart why I respectfully disagree with his approach when it comes to comparing rifle cartridges. Alright, when we talk about comparing rifle cartridges, this is one of the pastimes of rifle hunters across the country. What's better, the 30-06 or a 308, a 270, 300 Win Mag. These are the campfire discussions that any of us who've gone into a hunting camp have had at one point or another. And with the amount of ballistics calculators available today, great bullet selection, and ballistics have never been really more accessible or easy to dive into and discuss than they are today. But what that leads to is an awful lot of information and opinions that aren't always rooted in the best facts and approaches to providing great cartridge comparisons. So in this video, I'm going to pull up a few that were recently done on Ron Spomer Outdoors, walk through kind of his philosophy and approach, and I'm going to point out some areas that you may want to be cautious on when comparing cartridges and things to look out for, because we see advertising hit an awful lot too on, shoots just as flat as a 243, just as much energy as a 30-30. There's all sorts of comparisons that then happen in the straight wall cartridge states like Iowa, where I live, where claims get made. But do they really hold up, or are we just cherry picking numbers based off of bullet configurations to tell a story? So let's dive right into it. I have the laptop up and we're going to look at the numbers. So the first thing up here is a screenshot from Ron Spomer Outdoors. And this is a recent video that just came out in the last week, comparing the 308 Winchester to the 358 Winchester. So you look at these rifles, the 308 Winchester is the parent cartridge for the 358 Win. So 358 Win is just a necked up 308. So similar case capacity. When we look at this on the screen, the information shared, some things that I'd look out for on the front end. If I really want to compare cartridges, anytime you talk max point blank range, this is a fine thing to know, understand what we mean by max point blank range, or at the bottom of the screen, it's MPBR. This is talking about my ability to hold on a specified target, and in the top center of the screen you can see this is a 6-inch target. How far can I just hold center of mass, put my crosshairs on it, and shoot? When you zero a rifle at max point blank range, you kind of knock the nuances off. And what I mean by that is you don't see the peaks and you don't see the valleys of where that rifle shines, and you don't really see how much that rifle's dropping inch over inch as it progresses out. And it kind of mutes the effect of drops, especially out to 300 and 600 yards. Everything kind of muddles together. I don't like this as an approach to comparing cartridges, because you're really not seeing the difference in what you're buying and what you're doing. It just kind of melds together. The second thing is when we compare cartridges, and this isn't data that we have up on the screen, but when we compare cartridges of different diameter, the number one thing, if there's anything you take out of this, the number one thing we need to do is make sure what bullets we compare have two things. First, and most importantly, the sectional densities of the bullets should be as close to the same as possible. So sectional density is a measure that correlates the weight of the bullet to the diameter of the caliber. So in this case, we have a .308 caliber, and we see how does a 180 grain bullet correspond, and for a 225 grain bullet, how does a .358 caliber correspond? So this is just looking at bullet diameter and bullet weight. It's not called out here, and when we don't call it out, what can happen is we end up inadvertently favoring one cartridge over the other. I'm going to pull up this, and this is a format I like to use to view and compare rifle cartridges. So when I look at the screen, what I have pulled up and put some red boxes up first. Right here, if I look at the cartridges Ron went over, we have 180 grain, 308, and that's a .271 sectional density. Compared to a 225 grain, 358, that's a .251 sectional density. So right away, what this means is I'm comparing a heavier for caliber bullet in the 308 Winchester than I am in the 358 Winchester. So what does this mean? First, I'm going to favor muzzle velocity is going to be favored on the 358 Win compared to the 308. So it's starting to normalize muzzle velocity because as I neck up in cartridge, as I get a wider diameter bullet, my velocity should go down if I'm maintaining sectional density. What we've done here, and what this video did, is it muted that effect. And when you watch the video, if you go to Ron's channel, and you should follow Ron because Ron has great content, he calls out that even going lighter would be a better comparison, and that would further amplify the advantage of the 358 Winchester. But he goes on the 225 and he talks on the video about a 250 grain bullet in the 358 Winchester being a better comparison for matching ballistic coefficients. Matching ballistic coefficients is not something you should worry about, right? Like, don't worry about that. And I think I said it in the front of the side, and I'm going to go back. Sorry, I missed one. Sectional density, boom, we want to make those match up. The second one, we want the make of the bullet, right? And Ron does a great job here. It's 2 AccuBonds. Kudos on that. I want to match up sectional density. I want to match up bullet manufacturer and bullet type. So that way I get a really good apples to apples comparison. So going back onto the data, if we were to match sectional density, we would need that 250 grain 358 Winchester. And Ron astutely, he calls out, if he did that, it would impede so much case capacity that bullet would go even slower. And that's the point. That's why the 358 Winchester isn't popular. Because when you put heavier bullets in, or just even the bullets you want for the game you're taking, it doesn't go as fast. It doesn't have a good trajectory. It's kind of an anemic round. It's not like you can't shoot somewhat flat. It's still a fine 200-yard rifle. But folks, like, it's not this 300-yard elk gun that's portrayed in the video. Like, we're getting into a spot of flirting with just being wrong in that case. So when we look at the numbers, the next one is velocities. And this is one in both the videos I'm going to talk about. I don't believe there's ill intent, but it's not that hard to go into Nosler's load data and pull a set data set. Like, hey, when I go to compare loads, what you'll see, just grab the fastest powder, I grab the fastest loading for both, and I normalize it. What happened here is we've got 2600, which is a little rounded down. We got 2550, which is a little rounded up. And all of a sudden, we've tilted in favor another 50 feet per second for the 358 Win. It's a small thing, but when we're doing these comparisons, it's not hard to just use the load data to give an accurate reading. And this is a case where we don't do so. The third thing in this is Ron talks a lot in the video about the effective range of the gun and using energy as a metric. What we should be using, and here we go, is velocities is another thing to call out. When we start getting below 2,000 feet per second, and the AccuBond is advertised at 1,800 feet per second to open, we're fall off at 400 yards or below it on the 358, 500 yards or below it on the 308. That maintaining velocity at distance is a big part of it. And when we use these harder bonded bullets, we really have to be conscious of the on-game performance and the velocity. And talking about hunting rounds, this is another thing we should be talking about, is not just do we have enough energy when it arrives at the animal, but is the velocity enough to make the bullet do what the bullet should? So these are a few things I want to call out. And we have this 180 grain AccuBond. I'm going to show you the comparison and how I changed it up. All right, so we took that 180 grain AccuBond, and if you want to go true apples to apples, I lowered it down to 165 grain AccuBond. So now we're within 3 1,000ths on our sectional density, and we really want to be with under 10 1,000ths on our sectional density to get a good comparison. Most of the time you can get under 7 1,000ths without much issue, and you're really starting to mute that effect of sectional density. We have like weighted bullets for caliber, and now all of a sudden you do see there's a big disparity in these rounds. The 308 is much faster. The 308 shoots significantly flatter out to distance. It is a flatter cartridge. It deflects wind better. There's a reason why the 358 is not a popular round. This is it. If you do want to have a close quarter gun and you need a bigger frontal area for game, go for it. But sectional density is important, and it's often missed when we talk about bullet weight on game. And if you want to shoot deer size game, a 251 is usually fine if we're talking about a conventional copper and lead bullet. If you're talking an all copper bullet, you can usually go lighter because they maintain weight better and penetrate better. But when we talk about sectional densities going from deer, going to elk, going to dangerous game, there's a reason we have a graduation of weights, and it's about penetration, breaking bone, and having a clean, ethical kill on large game. So I went through that comparison and how I'd modify it, and you can see the velocity improvement on the 308. You can see it really walks away from the 358 win. The next one, and the one that really got me initially, is this 7x57 Mauser video that Ron had put out. And I'm a 7x57 Mauser owner. I love my 7x57. I don't own a 270. I've never been a huge 270 person. But this video got me, I wouldn't say fired up, because I don't get that fired up, but some of the things were just seemed off for me, and I think it's worth really having an in-depth discussion on how you should approach some of this stuff, and how also you just want to be able to do this yourself. If you're really looking at cartridges, and if you see something like, wow, the 7x57 Mauser is just as flat shooting as a 270, that's amazing. I didn't know that. It's because it's not, right? Like, it just isn't. And here's another one where we have two cartridges with the same bullet weight that are different calibers. This will always favor muzzle velocity for the caliber that is bigger. So we have a 277 inch diameter bullet in the 270, shooting 150 grains. We have a 284 or 0.284 inch shooting 150 grains. The heavier bullet, or the bigger caliber will have the advantage. Now, even though the 270 has more case capacity, we just want to look side by side here, there is a velocity advantage that will be gained by having more area for the powder to act on. This is just really the physics and what goes into a rifle firing. If I have more area to act on to put my force, I can drive the velocity faster, especially if we're the same weight. As that weight goes up, the velocity goes down. This is just simply how the process works. 270 has more case capacity. The 7x57 is getting just an advantage here because we're shooting the same bullet weight. Another one that gets me fired up, and this is probably what actually got me, was looking at the load data from Nosler. So we looked at those velocities. We were at 2858 for the 270, 2831 for the 7x57. This is the 7x57, the data that was used in this video, it's the fastest load data published for that bullet by Nosler. The fastest. And there's a discrepancy. Like, from slowest to fastest, it's almost 250, or is it over? No, it's over 250 feet per second difference from slowest to fastest in the 7x57 just in powder selection. So we go way fast on the 7x57. On the 270, we're kind of in the middle of the road honestly cheating a little bit towards the bottom on powder selection. So we're leaving like 60 feet per second on the table again against the 270. And in Ron's defense, what it looks like is that he's using velocity data that's coming off of the box for the 150 grain AccuBond long range, the trophy grade ammo from Nosler. It's pretty close to that velocity, so it gives some benefit of the doubt. But if you're doing comparisons on cartridges and you're choosing a bullet, say from Nosler has their low data published, go grab the fastest powder for both and you have a clean head-to-head comparison. Right away when I see this, I'm thinking we've got choosing the same bullet size has put some things in favor for the 7x57. I chose the fastest load data, and I left about 60 to 70 feet per second on the table for the 270. That's in favor of the 7x57. And we do those because there's more case capacity in the 270. So we shouldn't be surprised when that video ended, and it's like, wow, the 7x57 can shoot really flat. No, it's not. It's not a flat shooting cartridge. It's much closer to a 7mm 08, which is also not a flat shooting cartridge. The 270 historically is a pretty darn flat shooting cartridge. There's faster and flatter, but the 270 does dang good. So let's look at how I went back and I ran these comparisons, and this is how I'd encourage you to do the same thing. 270 Winchester, AccuBond, 130 grains, .242 sectional density. 7x57 Mauser, we're also on the AccuBond. Then we're at 140 grains, .248. So boom, we've got our sectional densities lined up closer. Now let's look at the velocities. Yep, we're shooting pretty fast. Out of that 270, we got about a 260 feet per second advantage over the 7x57 Mauser. Makes sense based off of the case capacity of that round. We're holding velocities faster all the way through. Trajectory is flatter all the way through. Energy is higher all the way through. Wind deflection is actually pretty darn close, and it is because how that bullet's constructed from Nosler. We're just getting a better ballistic coefficient. So the ballistic coefficient is making up for the extra 250 feet per second in velocity out of the muzzle that we see from the 270 Win, and that's canceling each other out. So no difference there, but these are the things that I encourage you to do. There's tools online. jbmballistics.com is a free ballistics calculator. It has preloaded information from bullets in it. You can pull that information in, and it will have the caliber, the sectional density is a calculation that will run. It has the ballistic coefficients. You provide the velocity, and you can generate these charts yourself to make these comparisons, and you can get away from having to rely on other folks to run these comparisons for you. So when you're looking at caliber to caliber comparisons going forward, keep some of those things in mind. Sectional densities, you want to make sure they line up. You want to make sure that bullets are coming from the same manufacturer. And if you're comparing, say, a 300 Win Mag to a 30-06, you should probably use the same bullet in those cases too, to make sure that you're not inadvertently favoring one over the other. And if you want to compare a bullet to bullet, just use the same cartridge. So if I want to look at a 165 grain AccuBond compared to a 200 grain partition in my 300 Win Mag, we can run those comparisons, and now we're just looking at how that bullet performs. We can get, I'll leave one caveat with the faster twist barrels that come out today. You might see some of those comparisons that are really fair in, say, a 300 PRC shooting a 230 grain bullet because it has a faster twist barrel that you just simply can't do in the 1 in 10 factory twist that come from a 300 Win Mag. We could talk about how custom rifles can overcome that, but that might be time for another conversation. So thanks for taking the time to listen to me today. Hope you enjoyed the discussion. If you have thoughts, please comment below. If you like the content, click like, subscribe to the channel. And until next time, get out there and enjoy the outdoors.